Howdy, everyone. All right, so I'm trying to figure out how. All right, let me back up. First of all, I decided I am, in fact, going to cut this forward edge first. I'm going to get this forward edge as perfect as I can get it within reason because there still might be a little bit of movement as I adjust and trim the back edge. All right. I want to tackle this one first because this is the most difficult to do. Trimming this back edge to meet and match with the center of the roll bar, I'm assuming that's going to be easier. So I'm going to tackle this first. So what I've done, I don't know if this is going to be beneficial or not, but what I've decided to do, like I said, Vans talks about the front edge of the windshield should be roughly 1.75 inches back from the forward edge of the canopy skin. So I measured that 1.75 inches back, and I drew a line all the way around. And then on that line, at 1 inch increments, I put little tick marks. And of course, those were referenced off of my center line here. So starting in the center, I did 1 inch increments along that 1.75 inch reference line. And then I transferred each of those tick marks from that line all the way back to the back edge of the instrument panel. And then I just connected the dots to give me these straight lines all the way across the instrument panel. You can also see that I've pulled back the plastic and taped it up out of the way so I can see a little bit better. And I did that on the plastic that's inside the canopy. I peeled it back and taped it so I have a clear shot through the canopy to these lines. And you can see those there. Just as a little hint, a good way to transfer these lines these tick marks here back. I just used a sheet of paper. So I put the corner of the sheet of paper on a tick mark. And then I lay one edge of the piece of paper perfectly along this line. I put the corner of the paper on a tick mark, and then I go to the other end of the paper and put a tick mark. I basically used a sheet of paper as my square. And that works good on curved surfaces. So that's what I did. Now I've got the canopy back in place. I've got my reference lined up here. I've got my reference lined up in the back. And I continue to monitor how the canopy sits in relation to the center of the roll bar. That's important because as you cut and manipulate this is probably going to want to move in different orientations, and you want to make sure that when you're finished cutting up here, you still have enough material back here to deal with this line. Now, of course, after you get this cut, you can always slide the canopy back and then trim the canopy to the line. But you want to be careful with that because I'm sure there's a reason why this 1.75 inch dimension is specified by Vans. And of course, if you cut this a certain way and then you end up sliding it back, your cut may no longer match the skin of the canopy frame. So as always, steady as she goes. Take a deep breath and be patient. So that's where I am now. Reference lines, canopy lined up. So now what I think I'm going to do, you can see I've drawn a very, very rough marker line here. That's actually drawn on the inside. While I had the canopy upside down and I was pulling back the plastic, I could see a quite definite contour of the canopy all through this forward edge. So I just tried to roughly highlight that with a marker. Don't know again. I don't know if that's going to be an advantage or not, but I figured it could be another data point. So I just roughly eyeballed where that contour was and kind of highlighted it with the marker. So now what I'm going to try to do is basically just take references off of each of these points. So measure from here back roughly to where this line is drawn. Continue to eyeball it and try to roughly gauge where that contour is. Whatever I do on one side, whatever these measurements are here, I'll match them on the other side. And I'll just continue to go back and forth and try to figure out, eyeballing it, where the canopy wants to naturally lay on the curves, how far back from my reference line I can make a mark, and do that on both sides so that it will be symmetric. And then as I transfer these lines onto the canopy, of course, I'll connect those dots, and that should give me a nice curve on this side and an identical curve on the other side. The tricky part is going to be making sure that I don't cut it back too far, because then there's going to be a gap between the skin and the canopy. If I don't cut it back far enough, the canopy is going to rest on that high point, and again, I'll have a gap. So this is going to be a little tedious, but it's like that for everybody. This is just a method that I'm going to try to use so that I have definite reference points to measure from on each side, and at least it will be somewhat symmetric. Another thing to look for when you're laying out your graph lines, if you will, on your skin, just to do a reference check, you can reference off of the rivets to make sure that things are working correctly. So you can see this line here, as it goes back, it cuts through, this line here. As this line here goes back, it cuts through the center of that dimple. And you can check that on the other side. Does that same line cross in the same area? And mine does. So here's the line, and you can see it cuts right through the center of that dimple. So I'm confident that the graph is symmetrical on the skin. Now I just have to figure out where to transfer the points for each of these lines onto the canopy. So that's the next task. Let me get that going, and we'll see what gives. Howdy, everyone. Nothing major to talk about at the moment. I just wanted to get back real quick just to give a fast update. All I'm doing at this point is continuing to trim this front edge. It's a little bit difficult because you've got the curve of the skin. The skin also kind of runs uphill. This angle here, it kind of runs uphill. Then of course you've got the curve of the canopy in this orientation. You've got the curve of the canopy in this orientation. I've been chipping away at it a little at a time, very little at a time, trying to creep up on it, but it's difficult because you can see, just as an example, you can see I've got a little bit of a gap here. You can see how that flexes, but it's tight in this area here. So I keep cutting this back, because as I cut it back, it goes up. It follows the canopy up, which is going to create a gap, which will allow the rest of the canopy to come down. But you can see the more I cut this back, the more distorted the shape of the canopy is. This comes across, this edge comes across, and then here it's going to end up being cut out like that. So I'm not happy about that, because like I said, I keep trying to cut this section back going up the canopy, which would allow it to slide down and close this gap, but this is getting so obnoxiously huge that I'm losing faith in that approach. So I think what I'm going to do going forward, I'm going to concentrate more on just having a nice clean shape of the canopy all the way around. And of course I'll try to match it to the skin as best as I can, but I'm not going to get too hung up on that, because obviously this is going to get a fairing put over it. So that's kind of where I'm going. I'm just going to keep working at it and trying to get it as best I can to fit as well as I can. And then, like I said, once that gets close, then I can start cleaning up these edges because they're hanging down too low. And once I get those figured out and I get the canopy pushed into place, then I can finalize this. I can clean up this back edge. So as always, just kind of steady as she goes. Oh, another thing that I did notice that I think is a benefit that I'm definitely going to use. This is plan number 49. This is print 49. This is kind of nice just as a reference because it gives you the side skins and the top skin, and it has the rivet holes located on the plan. You can see the edge of the canopy right here. Don't get confused down here. This is not the canopy edge. This is the edge of the fairing. You can see they've got a picture of the fairing here. But if you look, this edge is the canopy edge. And if you follow that, you can see how it curves, and you can kind of see where it curves. As it comes down and starts to curve, it basically curves at this fourth rivet right here. Again, follow this canopy line. Right here, it's just above this fourth rivet. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the line of rivets that is part of your the tube on your canopy frame. So I'm kind of using that a little bit as a guide. So when you come over to my canopy and you look at it real quick, here are the 2 screws. So these are the 4 rivets, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see I've got this cut just above the 4th rivet. So it's your airplane, it's your canopy. You can cut it however you want. I've seen canopies where they kind of come across here a little bit further and then they kind of have an abrupt cut up. Perfectly fine, however you want to do it. I'm going to try to keep mine more of this flowing kind of curve. And I know that a lot of people keep this front edge straight for quite a while. They'll keep this edge square for quite a while and then they'll curve it. Again, however you want to do it, it's no big deal. But when you look at this other print, let me see, when you look here, this almost looks like it's straight across. And I don't know if it is or isn't, but when you look at this other print, if I can get it out, when you look at this other print, you can see on the side view that the canopy seems to curve all the way up to the very top. So you can imagine, of course, this area here is curved, right? And it looks like the canopy itself, or at least the fairing around the canopy, is curved all the way to the very center. And you can kind of see that here on this drawing. You can see that from the center point looking down, and right away it looks like the canopy starts to curve away from this line here. Just some observations, right? So what I'm pointing all that out basically just to say that you don't have to get completely hung up on, oh, I have to maintain a perfectly straight line across the front of the canopy for so much of a distance and then curve it. If you start to curve it, even if you curve it all the way up to the center point, that's perfectly fine from what I can tell. Now, that's not the gospel. That's just an observation. I don't know how accurate it is, but initially I was going to try to keep this nice and straight, but now I'm thinking, you know what? I'm not going to worry about this being perfectly straight. I'm not going to worry about when the curve starts, where it ends. I'm just going to get the canopy to fit nicely as best I can. So, again, another long-winded explanation that probably is not very helpful, but I like you guys, right? I want to get on here and say howdy. So, all right, I'll get back to work, and next time we chat, maybe I'll have something that you guys can actually use. All right, talk to you later.